Okay, so we're now recording. So welcome everyone officially. I'm Tash. I'm a medical herbalist and I'm here to give you as digestible as I can intro to herbal medicine for female hormones. And I was having a little practice last night and I found that I have a tendency to give too much detail because I could talk for a whole hour just on one herb. So I want to give you what I feel is going to be most valuable and what would be most valuable for me. Because, obviously I experience my hormonal cycle. I experience those ups and downs. And weirdly today, like I've had a kind of a bit like a sympathetic pregnancy in that I started my period last night, 2 days early. It's almost like I've tuned in to our little thing that we're sharing. Um, so yeah, this is me. I'm Tash. I trained in Western herbal medicine. So that's the tradition that many people don't know that we have, but we have a tradition of medicine that was practiced in Europe and North America, which was before sort of the big pharma came in, and plants were the drugs that were used. So as much as maybe modern doctors might scoff at many herbal medicines now, actually, that's what they did before. So yeah, they really do work. So today we're going to look at the female menstrual cycle, and I want to spotlight and give you the most valuable things. So for me, right, I just gave a little bit of background here about herbal medicine. This just explaining about how there was a shift in the 1920s away from natural medicine in the West. And even now, in 80% of the world, herbal medicine is their primary source of healthcare. But somewhere in the 1920s, there was a big move towards only funding the chemical drug schools and actually actively blocking homeopathic and naturopathic physicians from sort of being included in the medical realm. And even doctors could get in trouble for collaborating with them at one point. So there was a real kind of conscious shift to sort of suppress that knowledge. And I feel that now people are really becoming more aware of the limitations of modern medicine. And hopefully that's why you're here. So what I wanted, yeah, as historically, as being a Brit, I didn't grow up with herbal medicine in my culture. I genuinely didn't expect that herbal medicine would necessarily be that strong and necessarily have much effect. And I could forget that many of the herbs that we're actually used to, like coffee and green tea, that we know are actually quite powerful, but they're so integrated in our daily lives. I wouldn't see that as herbal medicine. And actually, once you really explore, you can see that herbal medicine can be really effective when you understand how to dose it and which herbs to choose, and also understanding a little bit about which herbs to choose for you, because we all have slightly different tendencies. Some people tend to be maybe more dry, tending to more dry skin, for instance, or tending to get very hot. And these sorts of elements can help us choose which herbs might suit you and which herbs might not have the same effect for you. And I got really inspired by Amazonian plant medicine, because the way that they see it there is that each plant is a teacher. It's a doctor. It's like a wise spirit, an elder who has something to teach you and to help you transform and to heal if you're open to that, if you wish to receive that. And that really opened up this whole beautiful perspective to me. And I think that there's so much potential in working with herbs in a more mindful way, in this way. And so as we go through this webinar, and you may feel interested in a particular herb that I might mention, and maybe that's an indication that that could be one that you want to explore, smell, taste, and see how it feels in your body and what effects it has for you. So I wanted to ask, what would you change about your menstrual cycle and your hormones? So you're very welcome to write a comment now. And I'll just share what I wanted to share for this webinar. So I think we can all relate to the fact that as women, we go through these ups and downs, and it's very easy for us to shame ourselves when we're not performing as high as maybe we would like to be, or we think that we should be. For instance, at certain phases in our cycle where we have less energy, or we're feeling very vulnerable, or we're feeling quite fearful sometimes, or teary, or angry, reactionary. And it's actually very obviously very connected to our hormones. And I think we can sometimes feel like those feelings are wrong. And it's really important for us to start to embrace the fact that this is how we were made. We are supposed to be like this. We're supposed to be cyclical beings. And there is value in all of these stages that we go through. But I think we have to really focus on not shaming ourselves, because it is obviously really ingrained in our culture to naturally put ourselves down because of those things. And I think I can speak from past relationships and so on, where I've really wanted, for instance, some reassurance from that partner, and they weren't able to give me that. And I would feel like I had to suppress my own feelings because I was afraid that I would be too much. And I think we really need to change some of this conditioning, because I think we need to embrace ourselves. Obviously, it doesn't give us the license to treat people badly, but it's, I think, really embracing ourselves, accepting ourselves, and seeing it in a different way. So many Native American cultures, they would have seen that time of menstruation as something that was quite an important experience for the women in that community. And in certain traditions, those women would go off together for that kind of week, because, you know, we all sort of align our cycles together, and they would go off, and it was seen as either they were receiving wisdom, or they were connecting and kind of transmuting energies on behalf of the community, or they were very sensitive and open at that time, and spiritually open, and they could be hurt by being exposed to other energies. And I think that, of course, we're out there, we're living our lives, we're being independent women and so on. But I think it's important for us to really remember that our bodies are doing something quite major. We're kind of that portal between birth and death. And that's what our bodies are doing. That's why we do this, is because we can create life, right? Which is an amazing thing. So I think we really need to embrace it. So just a quick review about the hormonal cycle. So I'm sure many of you may have seen this. So what we call day one of our cycle is our first day of our bleed. And it's usually about 3 to 7 days. For most women, on average, it's about 5 days. And what we call the follicular phase is that phase between the bleeding to ovulation. So it's the midpoint of your cycle. So it's going to be this section here. And you'll notice the yellow line here on this graph. It shows that estrogen is rising. And estrogen is really it's actually, I'm just going to stop sharing one sec. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. One sec. Right. Not sure why this has happened. Okay, bear with me, people. Sorry. I'm just trying to not stop sharing, but sharing this. Okay, just want to refresh this because I'm pretty sure I reorganized my slides. Okay, no, I moved it back. Okay, it's fine. Anyway, back in the zone. So estrogen's rising in our follicular phase, and that is when we're going to feel our best. So estrogen is our feminine hormone, where it's the creating energy, it's that building. It's responsible for the development of our sex hormones. It's responsible for the development of our sex organs, you know, our reproductive organs. It's responsible for moisture in the vagina. It's responsible for some of there are estrogen receptors all through our body, in our skin, everywhere. And it has an impact on so many things. It also has an impact on our neurotransmitters. So it can have an impact on our mood. It can have an impact on temperature regulation. So that's why we may have things like hot flushes, because when the estrogen is out of whack, then it can cause all of those other elements to be a little bit out of whack as well. So at this point, this is generally when we feel our best. And so it's a great time to be doing lots of social things, being active and so on. And then we reach ovulation. That's the release of the egg. And one of the clues to ovulation is egg white discharge. So it will be around day 14 or the midpoint of your cycle. It's 14 days before the end of your cycle, basically. And then that's when your libido will peak at ovulation. So we actually have really low testosterone. Our testosterone is much lower than men. I mean, it's like 5% of men's. And then we just have a little boop, little tiny peak at ovulation, but that can be enough to get you feeling a little bit feisty. And so your partner or you may notice that, and that's also a great time to have energy to do things like strength training and so on, because you're going to feel much more stronger, powerful, and ready to go. And then we've got luteal phase. And so this is what I really want to focus on in this session of how I can support you best, because my experience with not feeling good in myself, of having issues in my relationships and so on, it's generally been around this phase. This is the phase where there's a lot of stereotyping about PMS, about women and so on. And it's when we experience the most feelings of feeling vulnerable, feeling down, feeling fat, feeling all of these sorts of feeling ugly, having breakouts in our skin, all of these things. And it's what's happening is estrogen suddenly drops after ovulation and testosterone goes back down. And so we generally feel quite vulnerable at this point when this drops. This is maybe 10 days before the end of our cycle. And then progesterone starts to come in, and that can help us to feel a little bit better, a bit more settled. And then that will also drop. So for the last few days, we will be kind of low on all our sex hormones, and that's when we can be particularly vulnerable. And so these points are the points where we really want to support. So I could talk to you also about when you're bleeding. There's lots of things we can do to help in terms of, and what this means here is easing the bleeding and easing the pain. That's what I mean here. And we could go into more detail on a future presentation. But here, I want to really focus on how we can support ourselves at these points, especially when both of the hormones are low. Okay, so I think it's really important for us to acknowledge also that sometimes the emotions that come up and we may feel embarrassed about are sometimes things that we actually need to express. Sometimes they're things that we've been suppressing. Maybe we feel like it would be embarrassing to share that, or, you know, it would cause conflict or something like this. Sometimes it can be a beneficial thing for us to observe what those things are. Maybe we don't need to express them to the person, but maybe we need to at least express them to ourselves. And sometimes it can actually be really healing for us to express those things and receive validation and receive support. And sometimes that can be exactly what we need. But of course, we have to have people around us that actually understand us and accept us. And one thing I've realized more than ever is that acceptance starts from ourselves. You know, we have to first really, really embrace ourselves just as we are. And like I said, it doesn't mean that we have license to just treat people how, you know, in a bad way, but it's acknowledging that, like, we are like this, and that's a beautiful thing. We're wild, natural women, and that is a wonderful, beautiful phenomenon. Okay, and I don't think that we should feel ashamed for that at all. So it starts with ourselves, and then when we accept ourselves, we can also expect acceptance from people around us. And what I want to give you is plant allies that can help in a practical way. Of course, we need to think about getting proper sleep, because if you don't get proper sleep, that will send your hormones out of whack again, also your metabolism. And nutrition. I want you to include foods that you love. I want you to enjoy your life, But there are certain foods that have hormone supporting and gut supporting actions. And gut health is also related to your hormonal health. So estrogen is like the feminine hormone, right? And it's famed for being the hormone that allows us to bear children. So it's the hormone that makes us relational. It's said to be the hormone that creates harmony, around it allows us to be so advanced at creating harmony, being aware of where our children are, being aware of how everyone in the family is feeling and being able to support them. And often when women go into menopause and they have fluctuations in their estrogen, or after menopause and they actually have a lower level of estrogen and they are a little bit less cyclical, they're a bit more constant, like the male cycle, but they're still sort of spiritually cyclical, we could say. Then sometimes there's conflict during that transition, because sometimes those women start to speak up for themselves and not people please in the way that maybe they had before. And I think there's some value that we can take from this process that we go through every month that allows us to have less estrogen and look at what things we might be suppressing. And are we truly advocating for ourselves? So there can be benefits to this experience as well. So estrogen, we basically feel good when we have estrogen, when we have a good amount of estrogen going. Progesterone is said to be the happy, chilled, calm hormone. It's really high when we're pregnant. I mean, both are very, very high when we're pregnant. And it's often a hormone which it can be connected to when we don't have enough progesterone. Sometimes people can feel more prone to anger, more prone to feeling anxious and unsettled. But actually, to be honest, that can be for many different reasons. Not just a low progesterone, but low progesterone is very common. Phytoestrogens are found in plants. So they are chemical constituents that are naturally occurring in a plant. And in a way, it's a bit like a baby toy where you have those shapes with the holes and you have to put the shapes into the holes. If you just imagine that, a phytoestrogen, its cell is shaped almost like the estrogen receptor, but it doesn't quite fit. So what you get with a phytoestrogen is you get a light sort of tickle of the estrogen receptors. And it means that if you have really high estrogen in your body, which sometimes happens, sometimes we have too much estrogen in relation to progesterone, and that can be a problem. And that can cause things like fibroids, endometriosis, and so it can cause inflammation. And by having more phytoestrogens in the diet, like soy, like flax seeds, and many legumes from the legume family, it means that we're getting some of those estrogen molecules are not able to get into the estrogen receptors because the phytoestrogens are getting in there. So it means that if it's really high, it will slightly bring it down, the kind of average level of estrogen activity in our body. I hope that makes sense. And in turn, when you have low estrogen, whether it be during perimenopause or menopause, and for whatever reason, or you've been chronically stressed and your body is making cortisol instead of estrogen, because it will make cortisol as a priority to keep you going when you're stressed. And they both have the same precursor. So, and that's the case for all of your sex hormones. So if you're stressed, your body will prioritize making cortisol so that you can get through stuff. You can just get it through your day and you will have enough energy to perform. It's that fight or flight as well to some extent, but it will keep you going. It will keep you focused, but at a cost, because you will then have more harsh symptoms because you'll have less estrogen, you'll have less progesterone and less testosterone as well. And that's the same for men as well. They will have less testosterone if they're chronically stressed. So in that situation, if you have phytoestrogens available at hand, then it means that you can give yourself a little bit of estrogenic activity because you're getting that kind of a little bit of estrogen receptor activation from the plant estrogens here. And there's also many herbs that contain phytoestrogen. So Now, when I first made this um, presentation, I think I put too much detail. Won't have time. So basically, I just want to introduce you these herbs. So Agnes, I've just chosen some, which I think are really key ones, but there are many more that we could look at. Agnus castus is really famous, Vitex. It's got this kind of um, aromatic, almost like fragrant taste and smell, and it's got a peppery flavor. And it became popular in like the 13th century in France, because monks noticed that it helped them to have less libido, or they thought so. But actually, it's a phytoestrogenic herb, and it also boosts your progesterone. But it's got many uses, and we could go deeper on another occasion. But in a very simple way, this herb is great to take in a small amount daily for a few months for those people who have irregular periods, or who aren't getting their period, like it stopped for a while due to stress, or due to maybe being on some hormonal contraceptives. Also, people who have low progesterone, so maybe feeling very anxious and angry, like sort of severe anger. And I can give one example of one patient who I wasn't able to treat in person, because she was living overseas, and she was experiencing PMDD, which is a kind of extreme form of PMS. And it's when people can feel such extreme depression, they can feel suicidal, they can feel, extreme rage. And then, of course, they also feel really ashamed when they, shout at their partner or whatever it is. And she was such a sweet person, such a lovely girl. And she was experiencing this kind of rage that was coming out, and it was a real problem with her relationship. And I said, look, like, I can't send you anything, just for practicalities. It's just really difficult, but just get yourself some Agnus castus. And I told her how much to take, and I said, just give it a go. And it was really helpful for her. Just one herb. I don't normally recommend just using one herb, but because I think blends can be much more effective at addressing all the elements of sort of imbalances. But herbs, one herb can be really powerful. So it was really helpful for her, and it actually really helped her not only to have less volatility, also not to gaslight herself, and to realize that, I mean, she ultimately found that actually she just wasn't happy in that relationship, and maybe there were things that she had been suppressing that were coming out at that time in a more extreme way. But yeah, she's been able to have now a regular cycle and more of a normal, I would say, PMS. Okay, peony, one of my favorite flowers. I think it's my favorite flower. I think it's the most beautiful flower ever. I love really bulbous things. So we're in season at the moment. You might have seen peonies around in the shops. They're like little blobs, and then when they open, they're absolutely huge. These huge flowers. And I've put TCM here, so it's called the Peonia lactiflora, the white milk peony, and it comes from this traditional Chinese medicine. And obviously, being a Western herbalist, we take it's terrible to say, but yeah, we take herbs, we integrate knowledge from other systems. We don't integrate everything because we have our own system, but this is one of the herbs that's become really popular with Western herbalists as well. So it's phytoestrogenic, and it's supportive for heavy bleeding. It's anti-spasmodic, so it can help with cramping, and it's something that you can take all the time. It's the root that we use. I want to stress that it's the root. The flower's not going to be beneficial. And in summary, peony is great for regulating the cycle, but also specifically for inflammation in the pelvic region. So that can be people with too much estrogen, and you're getting really painful periods. You could be moving towards endometriosis, which is when the body starts to grow, kind of due to inflammation, starts to grow endometrial tissue outside of the womb, or adenomyosis, which is a very similar condition. And yeah, we can get inflammation from these imbalances where there's too much estrogen and not enough progesterone to support. And peony can be great to balance that. I thought of licorice next. Licorice root is surprisingly a very, very powerful herb. I thought because it's a sweet, it wouldn't be that powerful when I first discovered it. But I actually think you should, it's brilliant, but you should always blend it with other herbs because I actually think it's very, very powerful. Um, Licorice is phytoestrogenic, but it's also an adaptogen. So that means that it restores the adrenals. So when you've been really stressed, sometimes you've been under stress for such a long time, you're starting to get burnt out. So your body's been producing so much cortisol. You're not able to produce much of your sex hormones, and you're getting really severe PMS, you're getting really tired, and you can actually kind of get almost like adrenal fatigue. You get a bit frazzled and burnt out. Licorice is great for that. It's very moistening. It will nourish and restore that adrenal burnout. It will help the body to produce more cortisol again. So sometimes people have produced so much cortisol, they actually can't, they're struggling to even produce cortisol at the end. And so it's really, really great for stress, burnout. Um, yeah, and it's so that's what I would kind of say as its main thing. It's also great for high testosterone, and it's classically combined with peony. There's been quite a lot of research, licorice and peony as a combo. It comes from Chinese medicine, and it's really good for conditions where there's too much testosterone. So, for instance, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which has now been renamed to polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome, which is kind of a better description because not everyone has cysts and they have that. So this is a great one, I would say, for if you're really, really stressed, take it for a few months. I wouldn't take it forever. I'd take it on and off because it's really powerful and it's great. It's also antiviral and it makes things taste good as well. But as I put here, contraindicated if you have high blood pressure because it can raise your blood pressure. Red clover is a lovely, really abundant herb. You see it in the grass growing in the summer. You can just harvest it like that and stick it in a tea. You can blend it to make it a bit more like so there's a bigger surface area, so you're going to extract more of the medicine. You can dry it. You can hang it and dry it or put it in a little drying net. It's a great herb. It's super abundant. It is phytoestrogenic. It's a great phytoestrogenic herb. It's one of the legume family. So it's really rich in phytoestrogens. It's also traditionally a depurative. So that means it basically it cleanses and clears the skin. So if you're someone in particular who deals with skin breakouts, then that would be a great one to include in something that you might be putting together. Fennel seed is something that I think again is like such an easily accessible plant, but it is so therapeutic and it's a herb that is phytoestrogenic. It's an aphrodisiac for men and women. And it's what we call carminative, which means that it will get rid of gas in the stomach. So if you're someone who gets quite swollen, windy, if you've got an inflamed gut, it's not necessarily going to correct the gut inflammation. I would use it with other herbs, but it's very good at symptomatic relief. It will really soothe the stomach. It's very warming, it's soothing, and it's great. It's a lovely herb that you can pretty much add to any formula. It's very kind of, and it will make things taste nice as well. So it's a really great herb to include for people. So yeah, as I said, key indication would be wind and gut inflammation, but it's a great general phytoestrogen. Sage, I think, is a fantastic phytoestrogenic herb. So it's actually traditionally associated with singers and with sages, so like teachers. And it's got this affinity to people who talk a lot, people who teach, people who sing, people who use their voice. the wise people. So it's got this affinity to this postmenopausal woman who has become the sage of her community. But it's great for anyone who's talking a lot or who needs to use their voice a lot, because it has this kind of antimicrobial throat healing element. But it's cooling and it's very effective for hot flushes. So it's a great herb to include. It can be quite strong when dried, so might be one to go for as a tincture, but you can absolutely try it in a tea. You might want to blend it with other herbs. It's got an interesting flavor. It's got lots of bitters, and it's very aromatic, so it's stimulating to the digestion, and it's got cognitive health support as well. So there is some research that has shown that sage has improved memory recall on tests and so on. So it has these kind of cognitive protective, neuroprotective affinity as well, action. So this, I would say, is great for the menopausal stage, but anyone can use it who needs phytoestrogens. So you can have it if you're young and you're just having PMS, you can grab sage. That's absolutely fine. And the last one I wanted to include today is shatavari. I mean, there are so many herbs that I could introduce you to. Shatavari is one that's primarily from Ayurveda, another one that we've integrated into the Western tradition. And it's known as the woman with 1,000 husbands. So it's great for fertility. I mean, all of these can be used in different ways for fertility, but it's phytoestrogenic. It's one of the Rasayana herbs in Ayurveda, which is the longevity herbs. So they have so many benefits, but they are associated with longevity, like resilience and vitality throughout life. But in particular, as it's the woman with 1,000 husbands, it's moistening. It's very good for the drying of the skin. It's good for the drying of intimate areas. It's also so lovely for mental calm. So it's an adaptogen as well. So it's a really nice feminine adaptogen. I really like it because there are many adaptogens, which are these herbs that help us to deal with stress and help our body to still produce all the hormones it needs to and sort of deal despite the stress that's going on. And shatavari will do that as well, but it does it in a very soothing way. And I feel like it's good for anxiety. And it has this feeling of gentle, nurturing, feminine safety. So I think it's great for hormone balancing, for mental calm and stress. So it's a really multifunctional one, but I really feel like it's a woman's herb, this one. So I think it's one that's always worth knowing. It's not really one that's necessarily that easy to get as a tea because it's a root. So you'll often find it as a capsule, which is fine. So you won't necessarily use it as a blend, but that's okay. Cycle syncing theory. There are many people online now talking about cycle syncing theory. It's a theory that, in week 1, we should have this seed and we should eat this food and we should have these herbs. And in week 2, we should have this. And we can absolutely do this. But I personally believe in keeping things practical and quite simple. So, yeah, I mean, I've put here menstrual phase, I've put nettles, really rich in iron, obviously going to be beneficial. Peony, soothing to spasms. Follicular phase, when we're feeling good, when we're feeling energized, I've put here rhodiola. Rhodiola is an energizing adaptogen. But you don't necessarily have to, in my opinion, have anything during follicular phase and ovulation because you're actually probably going to be feeling good. So I actually don't think that you have to add anything personally, but if you want to, you might want to increase your energy at that point and really capitalize on that moment. But personally, I think just enjoy at that point. And I've put rose here because I think rose is a balancing herb and it's very deeply connected to the femininity. It's one of those that's spiritually associated with the feminine, with self-love, with beauty, with boundaries. And it's often said that if you drink rose tea, you become more beautiful, you become more feminine, and you become more empowered in that way. So I think, if we're looking at the point when estrogen is highest, I think of rose. But in terms of supporting yourself at that point where you're feeling a bit more vulnerable, where both estrogen and progesterone have dropped, we're going to be looking at phytoestrogenic herbs like red clover. We're going to be looking at adaptogenic and phytoestrogenic herbs and things that might give you mental support, like shatavari. And again, lately, luteal, it's the same, but I feel like you can even go more inward at this point, because cycle syncing theory is not just about what herbs we use or what we eat. It's also about respecting our energy at each point in the cycle. And for me, that's the most important thing. So for me, premenstrually, I want to go inward. I'm not feeling very sociable, and so it's not necessarily a negative that we're not out there performing. It can actually be a positive that our energy is directed inward, that we're getting the opportunity to deeply introspect and to really enjoy that, like give ourselves that. And I think that we need to honor and value that. So we can see the value at each stage of the cycle, that there's a point where our energy is building. There's a point when our energy is renewing. There's a point when our energy is building, where we can get lots of things done, where we can achieve our goals, when we feel sociable, when we feel playful, when we feel gorgeous, when we feel slim and our body feels its best and strongest. And then in luteal, we may feel like we start going more inward. And that can also have just as much importance as a woman, as someone of awareness, self-awareness, wanting to grow as a person. So I think that we need to move towards not shaming the outward achievements and really honoring that opportunity that our body is giving us to go more inward. So I put cacao here because I love cacao, and I think it's very, very nourishing and soothing. And it's also really rich in magnesium, which is really important as well for hormone synthesis. And it boosts your oxytocin, makes you feel good. And I think we need to feel good at that point when we're premenstrual. So I've got a little bit of an overview here about adaptogens. There are different types of adaptogens that you can include in your diet. And the point I really want to make here, because I don't have time to go into too much depth on all of this, is just that adaptogens can help when you've been stressed, which we all are, right? We all have a lot of pressures on us nowadays in modern society, with the cost of living going up, with all of these personal relationships and so on. And it can feel quite endless, and this can have an effect on us, no matter how good we're eating, no matter how wonderful, those kind of practical things are that we're doing. Adaptogens can be great supports that we take consistently for a few months that help to replenish us and rebalance things after a period of stress. They can also help us if we're going through a period of stress to kind of cope better. So we've got different types: energizing ones, rhodiola, panax ginseng; calming ones, ashwagandha, tulsi; immune regulating ones, so reishi. This should be a different picture. And then we've got balancing ones, shatavari and rose. Rose is debatably not an adaptogen, but it will help to restore you. And I'm talking about rose flower. It will help to restore you if you have been depleted after stress, and even it has an affinity to trauma. So it's really connected to the heart, the emotional heart, and that kind of feminine healing, that kind of motherly hug, let's say. And so it can be a great herb to work with in a more mindful way, if that applies to you. So I wanted to go into more depth onto adaptogens, but I think we won't have time today. But in future ones, then if you'd like to know more, then I can teach you a bit more about which adaptogens to choose. One thing I really want to tell you about adaptogens is we don't take them forever. Okay, they will plateau. Their benefits will plateau after a while. So it's really good to switch them for other adaptogens. So you could keep it really simple. maybe during the summer when you're feeling a bit social, you want to go for an energizing adaptogen, and you want to take that in the morning because it might disrupt your sleep. So for instance, rhodiola. But I will tell you, rhodiola is endangered. So make sure you're mindful about where you buy it from. It's also quite expensive, but it is amazing. Panax ginseng is also an energizing adaptogen, and it will really boost your sex drive. So if you don't want that, if you're single and you do not want to feel that way, then go for a different one. But then in the winter, you might want to go for more calming adaptogens. Or you might just want to go for really, just have them when you need it. Just have them for a month when you need it. Licorice, you could just have for a month. It will put you right back in the zone. Or you can have it a really low dose as part of a blend. And yeah, so ashwagandha is calming. Schisandra, one I haven't really mentioned, but it's one of my favorite herbs. It's a liver restorative adaptogen, which when it comes to hormones is really important because our hormones go through our liver. So a note on digestion here. Gut health is understood nowadays to be the core of all our health, and we're learning so much more about the microbiome, this idea that we're not sterile, that we don't want to disinfect everything, we don't want to use antibiotics all the time, and I'm sure you've heard this, because we are like symbiotic beings. We're populated with trillions of microbes, viruses, amoeba, protozoa, and bacteria. And the problem is really when things get out of balance. And what we're observing in these studies is that people are being born with less and less microbial diversity. And if you want a healthy ecosystem out there in nature, it needs to be diverse. That's what creates a healthy, self-regulating ecosystem, that diversity where everything is kind of kept in check by the other things. And what we're seeing now is because people are being born because of antibiotics, because of C-sections and so on, we don't get kind of baptized in the vaginal flora as we're born. It means that we're born with a much more depleted microbiome, and that is connected with more inflammatory issues, autoimmunity, things like eczema, like allergies and so on, and digestive issues, of course, because a lot of it is in our gut that we're talking about, our microbiome, but it's all over our skin, vagina, everywhere. And I mean, actually, there's some places that I think the lungs are sterile, but anyway. So we really want to feed a diverse microbiome. So you want to eat a wide range of plant foods, ideally organic, because, if things have pesticides on, you're basically putting antibiotics into your stomach. But I know that it's not always easy to get organic nowadays, but if you can, try and get a real range of plants, because each plant has its own little blend of microbes on it. And funnily enough, when we start to eat those plants, then we populate our gut with those microbes, and those microbes are the ones that like that food. So it's associated with making us crave those foods. So if you find that you're craving unhealthy foods, but you would like to eat something else, something more healthful, then you can start to eat more of those foods, and gradually you'll start to actually change your tastes towards it, and your gut will make you crave those healthier foods. And it's really important for us to be regular. So fiber is really important, as in whole foods, plants, because if things are too sluggish in the gut, then estrogen that's been excreted can actually get reabsorbed. And that's a problem and that's often involved in people who have too much estrogen in relation to their progesterone. People who, for instance, with endometriosis, with inflammatory pelvic congestion going on, fibroids and so on, it's associated with that. So you want to make sure that you're eating lots of plants, you're drinking enough water, and also liver health, because your liver is processing those hormones. So if you're drinking, or if you're taking various drugs, or if you're in a situation like that where you've got gut uterine inflammation, you're having to take more painkillers. All of these puts more stress on the liver because it's having to detox everything, the drugs, alcohol, and your hormones and everything else. And it's an incredible organ, but it's really important. So I always recommend including something to support the liver, because it is really crucial in hormonal health. So sleep as well, I just want to mention, won't have time to go into today, but it's so important to keep our hormones, our immune health, our metabolic health. And another time I can teach you about some herbs that can support you with sleep. So I just want to give you a note, if you wanted to make yourself up a blend that you feel drawn to, maybe a couple of herbs. So I give you a little suggested formula that you could put together here. So you can just have a single herb in a tea, but I put here some are so strong that I wouldn't recommend doing that, or at least not on a regular basis. So licorice root, it's very strong. You can have it on its own, but like you wouldn't want to have that every day because it would be quite a high dose. Valerian is one of my favorite herbs. It's a great herb for sleep. It's very mercurial, it's very changeable, so it's very sedative, but it can be stimulating in some people. Usually hot people, it has a kind of weird heating element. So in high doses, like if you're having it on its own, it can often have that sort of opposite effect. So I recommend blending those with other herbs that are going to balance them out. So here I put, for instance, you could have a bit of an adaptogen, a bit of an estrogenic herb, a bit of a nervous system herb, and a bit of a digestive herb. So, but you can just pick a few herbs that you feel drawn to out of these, put them together, make yourself a tea, 1 tablespoon. You want to infuse it for at least 10 minutes, and you want to cover it because the aromatic oils, the volatile oils can actually escape in the steam. So ideally you'll cover it and then you drink it, you get actually a medicinal dose of that tea then. And if you need to, if you have things going on, you feel you need actually to really correct an imbalance, then you're going to want to take your tea 2 to 3 times a day for a couple of months, and you will see, you should see a huge shift in a positive way in your health. And if you want some personal advice, then you can get in touch because that's what I do. I wanted to mention about self-talk. So, just really, like I mentioned already, like it's so easy for us to put ourselves down, especially when we're in that luteal phase, or if we're in the perimenopausal phase, wherever it may be, where our hormones, it's like our body's letting us down. You can feel more vulnerable, you can feel more exposed, like I'm overreacting to things and so on, or I'm feeling really fat, I'm not feeling good in my body, I'm feeling ugly, and that can be hard because it can affect, like you don't want to see people, or you don't want to put your face out there, and you don't want to do a call with someone and so on. Like I think it can really affect us in subtle ways. And I think it's really important for us to remember that, like, whether our body be more swollen, which it is in luteal phase, which is completely natural because we're taking on more fluid, we have to eat more. We have a higher metabolism in luteal phase, so it's okay to eat more. And actually, there may be a point when your body is telling you to eat more because it needs that energy to make progesterone. So if your body's telling you to eat at that point, like, it's okay to eat. It's actually needed. And to not feel guilty and shaming yourself about it, but actually say, no, this is what my body needs right now. And if you feel bigger, if you feel more fuller in your body, just remember that, a more curvaceous body, like if it's with your partner and you feel more worried about how your body may look, a more curvaceous body can be something that's very erotic. It's so feminine, it's so natural, it's so beautiful, and it's actually it's a gorgeous thing. It's a very indulgent thing. And I think anyone who would make you feel bad about that, I mean, I don't think that he's got the level of maturity for your relationship. And I think that, we deserve to be treated with respect. And I think, honestly, most men, they don't even notice these things today. But I think we really have to remember that, I'm a natural woman. Like, and yeah, okay, I've got like bumps and lumps and like, but I'm a woman and like, this is how I am. This is how I was born and it's gorgeous, and we just have to own it. And I think we have to, and it comes from first owning that ourselves and saying like, I am going to totally embrace myself as I am in all my power and all my feminine beauty and all of my wonder because I create life. Like, so I am a force to behold. And that has to come from us first. So I just really, yeah, really encourage you to accept yourself, treasure yourself, give yourself what you need. Don't gaslight yourself if you're not doing as much as you were in the follicular phase and so on. Okay, so another time we could talk a little bit more about personalization because there's some elements that we think about when we're putting together a formula for someone about what might suit them in terms of their medical history, in terms of the tendencies that they have, certain types of illnesses that suggest that they might need more cooling or warming and so on. But we don't need to go into that for today. Um, I wanted to give you a little bit about mental health support as well. Of course, you know, there are services there to give you deeper support in terms of psychotherapeutic support if that's what you need. Um, but there are some great plants that can be super powerful, super beautiful, and super supportive in that way. So I just want to give like a quick touch. And yeah, maybe one day I'll do a little webinar just about this. Verbena is a great one for self-acceptance. Skullcap for anxiety, for restlessness, for an over frazzled nervous system. These are ones you can include in your tea if you're making a tea or a tincture. Passion flower, it's specific for people who have a racing mind, racing thoughts. These are all nervines, so they're all calming to the nervous system. So you can stick any of these in, they'll do that. Chamomile, calming, and it's mother of the gut. So it will nurture a healthy microbiome. It will also reduce inflammation in the gut. And of course, we understand the relationship between the gut and mental health, that gut-brain axis that's, become very well known now because, maybe 70+% of our serotonin, our happy hormone, is produced in our gut. And if there's gut inflammation, then maybe we're not producing enough. But it's deeper than that as well. It's also about, if we're in fight or flight mode, if we're hyper vigilant, if we're always pushing ourselves, then we cannot at the same time be in parasympathetic mode, which is the rest and digest mode. So if you're always in fight or flight mode, sympathetic nervous system's activated, then you're getting stuff done. You're almost acting from fear and urgency. But you can't then at the same time digest your food properly. You're not going to be absorbing all the nutrients. You're not going to be um, you're not going to be sleeping as well. You're not going to ever feel calm and relaxed and settled. And so these nervous system herbs can help to calm the nervous system and encourage your brain to go into, or your body to go back to its rest and digest mode. And they're great for focus as well. Tulsi is like an inner peace. It's one of the Rasayana herbs from Ayurveda, and it's an adaptogen, multifunctional. Shatavari was already mentioned, hormone balancing and mental calm. And lemon balm is like a little boost. So these are just some that we can introduce. Maybe we go into more detail another time. Estrogen excess, we'll touch on that, but in a deeper topic. So I just want to open, if anyone has any question, I really thank you for your attention, your time. I know it's a lot of information. I really hope that what I've shared has been useful, that you've been able to grab something from it. And if you have any question at this moment, then, feel free to type it. I don't know how to see the chat at this point. Let me just stop sharing for a sec. Oh, actually, okay, got a little thumb up. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, no questions. Okay, great. Right. So we've talked for a long time, so I don't want to take up any more of your Sunday evening. What I just want to finish is that, well, as I said, I was trying to put this together and I wanted to give so much more information because I wanted to explain all of the things about how you can understand what's happening. What is this a sign of? Which herbs can support with which things, how to correct different imbalances, and so on. And also just go a bit deeper. I've given you as much as I can in this time, but I'm going to put together maybe a 3-part series in September. So I'm going to put that as available. So if anyone wants to go deeper, um, I will go a little bit deeper into what we use to the herbs that we use to support our hormones and other aspects of our health that we need to also address in order to correct those things. And also, I'm going to send you a sample of herbs that you can taste them, you can get a feel for them, and you can understand a little bit more about which ones might suit you and tune in to how they feel in the body. And you can get a bit more of an intuitive sense about how they work and who they might suit. And then I'll go a bit more in depth into different hormonal conditions, menopause, and some recipes that you can make, some remedies that you can make. Also, some herbs that are spiritually connected to femininity. And so I'm gonna make this course. I'm gonna stop recording. Thank you for everyone here, so I can give a bit more detail about this. How do I stop it? It's my first time recording a. Here we are. Okay, stop recording. Great. Um,